bipartisan team of senators revealing details of some long-awaited cryptocurrency legislation. This legislation is called the Responsible Financial Innovation Act, and it comes courtesy of Wyoming Republican Cynthia Lummis and New York Democrat Kirsten Gillibrand. Both senators join us right now, first on Squawk Box. And ladies, welcome. It is great to see both of you because there's so much anticipation about what this could mean. First of all, I'll ask you, Senator Lummis, how this kind of came about that you two are working together and how much support you found from your colleagues on this.
Well, we put out early drafts of this bill in December, so it's been a long time coming. And when Senator Gillibrand joined in, her contributions to this bill have been significant and important. We've put out several iterations for comments. We've had multiple meetings with regulators, with the regulated industry, and a lot of stakeholders. We wanted to take our time to put the best draft that we could assemble onto the table. We think we're there. Today's the day.
Senator Gillibrand, let's break it down for people who haven't seen the details yet. I think the most important part is that it declares that things like Bitcoin and Ether are commodities, and so they would be regulated by the CFTC. A lot of other things would be considered equities to be regulated by the SEC. How did you come about with kind of deciding this? How much squabbling is there? Because there has been some interregulatory kind of dispute about who should be able to regulate this between the CFTC and the SEC.
The most important goal of this legislation was to create safety and soundness, to create consumer protections, transparency, accountability, and certainty. When we met with industry leaders, they basically said, we just need to know what the rules of the road are. We've been seeking regulation from various regulators, and the delays in response have been unconscionable. And so what we did was common sense. We used existing definitions. If you're a security, you're going to pass the Howey test, which is the securities definition. And for CFTC, we already had the futures market, so we added the spot market for cryptocurrencies. And we look at each digital asset's purpose. And based on the purpose, we've aligned the regulatory framework around that purpose.
Already, though, there's squabbling that's continued, that's going back and forth. People saying, look, how can you regulate a decentralized effort to begin with? And by the way, aren't there conditions where some of these things would be considered equities and should be regulated by the SEC? You're right. This has taken a really long time. And the industry is kind of pushing back, and others are, too, jumping in on this. I guess that gets me back to that original question, Senator Gillibrand. How much support do you have? Do you think that this is something that the Senate will get behind?
I do, and I think this is just day one, and our goal is to make sure this goes through the 4 committees of jurisdiction. It takes a long time to build a regulatory framework for a new industry. And we expect this to go through the Banking Committee, which Cynthia is on. It'll go through the Agriculture Committee, which I'm on. It will go through Intelligence, and it'll go through Financial Services. These committees will have pieces of the bill because they only regulate parts of this industry. And regulation is necessary. You need to make sure that you have consumer protections. You need basic rules of the road, and that's what this legislation provides. We think there's going to be a lot of momentum behind this bill, having met with most of the industry stakeholders and the experts in this field, and we're just going to work with them over time to continue to improve the bill.
Who have you talked to, Senator Lummis, in terms of the leadership? Are they on board with this? I know you've reached out to both the left and the right. Where do you think your biggest support is coming from?
We have found very receptive people on both sides of the aisle. We've met with the leaders of the Finance Committee. As Senator Gillibrand mentioned, there will be 4 committees involved in this bill. So we'll want to go through and sort out how the bill can be divided among the committees and then continue to meet with all of their members, not just the chairs, but all of their members. The fact that we're on several of these committees helps. We've met with the chairs and ranking members of all of the committees of jurisdiction. They know we're working on it. They know our approach. They know that we're trying to just fit the digital asset world into our current regulatory framework and have a general overview of how we're going about it. So we've had dinners, we've had breakfast, we've had briefings, we've had meetings, we brought in speakers, we've gone to meet with them individually. Our staffs have met with their staffs. This has been a lengthy effort on our part to not only brief our colleagues, but also collect information from the stakeholders.
Hey, Senators, two questions for you. One is, and I'm sure you saw this a little over a month ago, Fidelity, the largest 401k manager in the country, announced that they were going to offer Bitcoin to users or to consumers. Companies have to choose to allow their employees to put Bitcoin in their 401ks. The Labor Department came out and said this is a terrible idea. What do you think?
I think the Labor Department's wrong. I think it's a wonderful idea. It should be part of a diversified asset allocation, and it should be on the end of the spectrum of a store of value. Obviously, if you have a fully diversified asset allocation, you have some assets that you want to produce income in the short run. You also want some assets that are just a store of value. And I think that's where Bitcoin really shines. I think it's some of the hardest money that's ever been created in the world. And for that reason, it belongs as a slice of a diversified asset allocation for retirement funds.
Senator Gillibrand, you agree, disagree?
No, I agree. And that's why this piece of legislation is so important and why it's so timely. Once you create basic infrastructure around these types of digital assets, where there are disclosure requirements, where they have a regulator, where there's full transparency, that is going to create the safety and soundness in the market that will give other people comfort that this is a market that is here to stay. It's one that is properly regulated and one that has oversight and accountability. And that's what this legislation is going to do. So while many people are uncomfortable with where these digital assets are being used or offered today, once a regulatory framework's put around it, there will be more comfort there.
Senators, and then I was going to ask you a philosophical question. Considering you're dealing with the SEC and the CFTC, there has long been chatter about whether these two agencies should actually be one, that there's too much competition between them. There's too much infighting about who's going to take this and who's going to regulate that and how they're going to do it in different approaches. Some people think the competition is good. Some people think the competition is terrible. What do you think?
I think it's our job as Congress members to create the laws and they implement the laws. And they should not be fighting over jurisdiction. That is why Cynthia and I work so hard to make thoughtful decisions about what part of these digital assets go to each regulator. Each regulator has expertise that is unique. It's important that the CFTC continue to review and have oversight over commodities. They're going to need more resources when this industry goes to them, which is why we have a revenue stream going into the CFTC specifically so that they can hire more experts, more cybersecurity personnel, and more lawyers. It's important that they have the resources to do the work we are giving them to do. But the distinct responsibilities of the SEC and CFTC are significant, and so they have to continue to focus on their areas of expertise and allow these markets to flourish.
And we spent a lot of time on the definition of the modern Howey test. In fact, we looked at every single circuit court decision that has ever referenced the Howey test to make sure that our current definition is sufficiently modern and updated so that it's going to be fairly clear between the CFTC and the SEC about which assets fall into which regulatory regime.
But Senator Lummis, the SEC chairman, has been very clear that he would like to regulate a lot of these things. Has he made any comment on this about kind of losing out on things like Bitcoin and Ether?
You know, we continue to meet with the regulators. I think you met with him yesterday. I'm meeting with him today, and we're going to continue to work with both the CFTC and the SEC to make sure that we both have found the right mix of using the Howey test to sort out which of those agencies best can regulate.
So it's
we think that because we're using the Howey test, it's going to come out just fine.
It just sounds like there's still some
ultimately,
massaging
this is
taking
Congress's.
place.
This is day one, and I think this is not the day of the vote on the bill. That will be day 100. Day one is you introduce the ideas so that the people who have responsibility to write these laws have a chance to look at it, learn about it. We can have a lot of roundtables and hearings about it, and we can mark up these bills. So each one will be taken their part that's their jurisdiction, and they will create their own oversight. That will happen over the weeks and months to come. And it is our job fundamentally for Congress to write these laws and the regulators to implement them. They don't decide what they get to keep and what they don't. We have to write that rule for them, which we're going to do. And over time, this market will become more and more stable and more transparent and have the kind of safety and soundness that we expect in the United States.
My guess is you're going to face some pretty significant lobbying from a lot of different parties over the next 100 days or so while you do this. Senator Gillibrand, let me ask you, your state, lawmakers in your state, New York, last week passed a law that will halt permits for new cryptocurrency mining facilities because of concerns about the environment. What do you think about that?
So I think that is an oversimplification of the issue, and I think there was just an urgency to protect specifically our pristine resources like the Finger Lakes, because clean water is essential for many industries in New York, such as farming, such as our drinking water, such as tourism. And so that was specific to one particular miner that the entire advocacy came around. I think long term, there will be places that are appropriate for Bitcoin mining and places that are not, but each state can figure that out. My view is I'm trying to create the regulatory framework for these digital assets with existing infrastructure and let states make other decisions about what they want. We also have a New York regulator who's been issuing bit licenses for a while. But that regulator is kind of doing all the work right now, and she would love to have some federal oversight as well.
Yeah. Senators Gillibrand and Lummis, we want to thank you for your time and thanks for your efforts on this. It's something the markets have been awaiting, so we will continue and watch and see where things shake out from here. Thank you.